Fearless Fun is a video about using poured watercolors, fluid acrylics, and paper collage. Hi, my name is Elise Beattie. Welcome to my Fearless Painting Studio in Spokane, Washington. They call me the Fearless Artist, and I would like to show you how you can be fearless too. For me, being fearless starts with a pouring process that I was taught by my good friend, the talented Jean Grastorf. After learning how to pour, I then learned about incorporating acrylics and collage into my watercolor painting process. Using mixed media is easy and a fun method of taking any painting to a new level, and I am going to show you how. I invite you to take a walk with me in my yard. Let's go see what is inspiring me to paint today. I like to begin my painting process by taking my original photo and printing this reference in black and white. This monochromatic picture is now my value study, from which I create a roadmap to drive my creative thought on. Proper preparation is my secret to a successful and fearless painting experience. So let's begin by mixing up some paint to pour. The paint I use is in a liquid form. For each color that I choose to use in my painting, I must make up a cup of fluid paint to pour 3 or 4 times during my entire process. Mixing the paint and water is an important step because I am making paint for transparent washes. I do not want unsightly lumps of paint surprising me and landing on my paper unexpectedly. I squeeze a tube of watercolors into a plastic cup filled with water. I mix vigorously until the paint is blended, and then pour the liquid into a sealed ketchup bottle for later use. Now I want you to remember, shaken, not stirred. I begin the process by saturating my paper with lots of water. In my first pour, I used my liquefied Hansa Yellow, quinacridone red, and phthalo blue. I move my paper to mix my paint. In my next photo, you can see how light my first transparent wash is. To build values and keep specific areas pristine, I apply a masking agent after my wet paper is dry on those poured areas that I choose to keep. What I enjoy the most about using the incredible white mask is after applying the frisket and letting it dry thoroughly, I can apply paint in any fashion and not worry about overworking my saved areas where the mask is applied on my watercolor paper. Each subsequent pour or painted layer creates an added value which builds form in my composition as I work from light to dark. Phthalo blue and New Gamboge yellow are allowed to mix on the wet paper to create a beautiful dark green. Now I think I'll add a little bit of quinacridone red right along the horizon line. Lifting my paper, shifting it from vertical to horizontal and back again aids in my creating wet into wet drip patterns on my painted surface. In this composition, I have purple irises on the lower left-hand side of my painting, as well as at the center behind the fence. I will use quinacridone red, phthalo blue with lots of water to make a nice tint for my lower left-hand corner. But at the center line, there's some other irises that I want to have a slightly cooler hue for. So instead of using quinacridone red, I'm pulling out my permanent alizarin crimson to make my purple tint. There are many different types of lace and or paper that can be used for this process. I have even used those wonderful holy plastic sacks that your onions and tomatoes come in. I lay them on the surface of the painting and I pour paint through them, letting them create their own fanciful patterns. By my third pour, my painting is covered with layers of masking, each layer protecting a special pattern created during the pouring process. When I have completed my pouring process, I let my watercolor paper dry overnight and then remove the masking agent. Excitement builds for the moment when the frisket is peeled off. For the first time, I get to see what my abstract techniques have produced. As you can see, I now have 3 distinct values in my painting. I love painting with transparent watercolor, but I discovered that when I include fluid acrylics, I am able to 1. Correct light areas that have become too dark, 2. Create a stronger range of dark values that do not look muddy, and 3. Incorporate what I call fancy brushwork, which you will see shortly. Preparing my acrylic paint is as important as the mixing process for the fluid transparent watercolors. I use fluid acrylics that match the hues of my chosen watercolors, and I add a dollop of fluid matte medium to my paint on my palette. The matte medium takes down the shine inherent with acrylics. The fun in the creative process continues, as this is now the time where I really stretch my imagination and start looking for and working with elements that allow me to transcend the realism of my photo to create something painterly instead. Phthalo blue and darylite yellow have been mixed together to create a wonderful vibrant green, which I will use throughout the background in my painting. With my brush held perpendicular to the surface of my watercolor paper, I'm using this mixture of paint to infill areas that have been left empty in the pouring process. I bounce back and forth between making my green a bluish green or a yellow green, whatever is required in the painting itself. My goal at this time is to work towards creating a visual balance between the foreground of flowers and the background of trees on either side of my composition. I do this by alternating layers of thin washes of fluid acrylics and using my brush to create a variety of fancy strokes. Depending upon how I hold my brush, the result can be a myriad of lines, pointillism, and/or abstract shapes. As you can see, I'm laying in a glaze of phthalo blue with a bit of quinacridone crimson in the background to further develop my darks and shapes. Introducing rich darks will help me to create atmospheric perspective. The dark, cool colors in my trees will recede into space, but the vibrant yellow-greens in the foreground will pop up. I have used phthalo blue and Hansa yellow in the foreground. My iris flowers are a mixture of quinacridone red, phthalo blue, and titanium white. In the near future, I will be using quinacridone red with a little bit of phthalo blue to paint my iris flowers. Back and forth I go between palette and painting, continuously looking to develop a full range of values that will define the landscape. Right now I'm working on the rocks that go across the path in my property. I'm using a mixture of phthalo blue, quinacridone crimson, titanium white, and Hansa yellow to neutralize my purple for the rocks. I've created a tint using titanium white, Hansa yellow, and a little bit of phthalo blue, and I'm glazing it in the foreground, that soft grassy area. Now I want to bring out the shape and the edges of the bush that you see in the lower right-hand corner. By juxtaposing my lights versus my darks, I can energize my center of interest. My landscape painting is coming along. I'm rather happy with what I see occurring before my eyes. I can see a center of interest, foreground, and my background is taking shape. I've been working with my acrylics for quite some time now. I'm starting to think it would be fun to grab some of those papers that I was pouring through and adding them as paper collage to create unique and unusual textural effects. Keep watching and I'll show you how I add paper collage to my painting. Have you been wondering what I was going to do with all those wonderful lace papers that we poured through? I save all the papers that I have poured through, saving them in large sacks so that I can use them later in my collage painting process. Now it's time to pull out that sack and start using these bits and pieces of colorful paper. As you can see, I've used 3 different lace papers with distinct patterns ranging from fan shapes to little squares to wonderful swirls and circles. Now I have to take these odd shapes of colorful paper and turn them into the shapes that will work for my landscape. I can do this in several different ways. If I want a sharp edge, I just cut the paper with my scissors. I can create a soft, furry edge to my torn lace paper by either tearing the paper when it's dry, or if I want a soft edge, but I need to control the specific shape that I want to use in the painting, all I need to do is dip my brush into clear, clean water and paint that shape on the lace paper. And then, gently, I can tear that shape . I like to create a collection of different shapes of lace paper with different patterns so that they're all ready for me to use in the painting process when I have my acrylic medium prepared. Here's a close-up of one of my pieces of lace paper with its beautiful swirling pattern. I think I'm about ready to start playing with some collage. I have enough bits and pieces of paper to make my painting interesting, and I have all of my favorite collage tools. I'm set. Are you ready? Let's get fearless. Let's start playing with our art supplies. I like to be prepared when doing collage, so I prepare a number of small pieces of collage paper and lay them out on my painting surface. Once I have a set idea of where I want these bits and pieces to go, I am able to pull out my collage adhesive, which is a golden heavy body medium. Then, using a brush loaded with the medium, I can apply my collage bits and pieces, gently pressing them into the surface of my 140-pound watercolor paper. I can use the medium underneath the lace paper to glue them down, or I can use the medium over my lace paper, and it will still glue it down to the surface of the 140-pound watercolor paper. I like to neaten my edges, so I wrap excess lace paper around to the back and I just glue it down. This secures the paper. I think I'll add another piece of lace paper that I've poured through. In this case, I want my fan pattern to have sharp edges. I'm going to use my scissors to cut out some nice forms. I want to make sure that I use my scissors to cut the fan shapes that I see in this beautiful lace paper. Once I figure out where I want to put the piece of paper, all I do is use my brush with my adhesive and apply it to the surface. You want to be very delicate when you're working with these lace papers. They are so fragile. Tools like tweezers are a big help in placing collage papers down onto the surface of my painting. Back and forth I go. One moment I'm using a brush with acrylic paints, and next moment I'm tearing collage papers. It's getting that piece of paper just right, shaping it, tearing it. I think I'll put it right towards the bottom of the tree. I sort of feel like there needs to be a little warm red color in that area. Previously, I've used a little bit of my heavy body gel medium and painted it onto the areas around and inside the tree branches. Here I am easily gluing the bits and pieces of lace paper on top of the surface, pressing lightly to adhere. I will frequently move pieces of paper around before I start gluing them down, just to get an idea of, does it work here, or do I need to move it to the left or right? I can move my papers around using my fingers, I can use my brush, and I can use tweezers. Most important thing is to make sure that the piece of paper is well adhered to my 140-pound watercolor paper. The fibers in the oriental paper are very delicate if they're wet, but very sturdy when dry. Once I'm done with gluing the piece of paper down, I go back to using some acrylic paints. I use the acrylics to paint the edges of the collage paper, adjusting the hues or the values to create a visual balance between painted and layered areas. At this point, I'm mostly working with my highlights and my deepest shadows to create balance between the collage papers, the acrylics, and the poured watercolor. Under the bushes on the left-hand side, I decided to add some pointillistic pattern at the edge of the collage squares and in the interior of the paper. I wanted to create an illusion of light sparkling through the vegetation. As with any painting project, I bounce from one area to another, working to create a push and pull between my highlights and my shadows. I alternate between using a flat brush to glaze transparent washes of acrylics or using my round brush to create pointillistic or line patterns in individual spots throughout the composition. Splattering with my brush is one of my favorite ways to create pattern across organic areas like shrubbery, trees, flowers, anywhere where I want a textural, painterly effect. Zooming in allows you to see how the paint and the oriental papers work together to create a dynamic and unique textural appearance to the painting. In working with mixed media, I allow myself to step aside from the constraints of realism. Instead, I look to create a painting that is inspired by what I see, but transcends photographic reality. The use of pouring my watercolors, adding acrylics, and finishing with the addition of collage allows me to start each of my paintings loosely and with creative abandon. As the work progresses, I continuously tighten up the imagery, focusing on values, detail, and pattern with my use of alternative mediums. For 40 years, I have enjoyed working with traditional, transparent watercolors. I find the challenge of balancing water and paint can be both entertaining and excruciatingly frustrating. For me, the opportunity to break the rules of customary methods is where my fun begins. I invite you, my creative friends, to give playing with mixed media a try. Using watercolors with both acrylics and collage is a marvelous way to take your paintings to a new level. Using mixed media is also a wonderful way to add or modify or just get in touch with your imagination. My painting is done. Are you ready to see what it looks like? I am naming this piece My Giverny, inspired by my gardens and of course Monet. I hope you have enjoyed watching the creative process of this painting. It's been fun sharing my fearless painting techniques with you. Now that you have watched the how of my process, here are some close-up photos so that you can see the visual and textural effects created by incorporating mixed media alongside transparent watercolors. Following is a gallery of paintings from my portfolio. Over the years, I have used these methods to create art that is both representational and abstract. If you would like to see more of my art or learn additional information about working with mixed media in my Fearless Painting classes, please visit my website, www.beattieartworks.com. At this time, I would like to thank the Florida Watercolor Society for inviting me to share my Fearless Painting mixed media methods of pouring watercolors using acrylics and paper collage with its members and artists around the globe. Happy painting to one and all. I would like to thank my good friend Vic Smith for allowing me to use his marvelous music in this video.